My Christian friends, many years ago, after a national tragedy, a former president of the United States offered the eulogy for the many souls that were lost. And I believe that that eulogy can be heard afresh with regard to the current global tragedy for the many souls now lost to this pandemic. And this is the eulogy. As a nation, out of this terrible tragedy, God has visited grace upon us, for He has allowed us to see where we've been blind. He has given us the chance, where we've been lost, to find our best selves. We may not have earned it, this grace, with our rancor and complacency, our short-sightedness and fear of each other, but we got it all the same. He gave it to us anyway. He is once more given us grace. But it is up to us now to make the most of it, to receive it with gratitude, and to prove ourselves worthy of this gift. My Christian friends, I believe that this eulogy draws us deeply into two profound theological truths. First, discipleship is being a disciple of Christ, and it is not a matter of our own doing. It is rather a gift from God. It is grace. We may not have earned it, this grace, but we got it all the same. Second, discipleship and being a disciple of Christ is not a matter of discipleship without discipline. It is rather a call from God. It is costly. It is up to us now to make the most of it, to receive it with gratitude, and to prove ourselves worthy of this gift. If grace is cheap, as it is often the way portrayed by many Christians, then our role as disciples of Christ is meaningless. Cheap grace is the deadly enemy of the church. Cheap grace is the justification of sin without the justification of the sinner. Cheap grace is the disciple who is content with worldliness and with renunciation of any higher standard than the world. Cheap grace is the disciple who is comforted in possessing the salvation which grace freely offers, a grace which does all the work for salvation. Cheap grace is the disciple who, rather than following Christ, basks in the consolation of grace. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance. It is the communion without the confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship. It is grace without discipline. It is grace without the cross. It is grace without Jesus Christ. In reality, my Christian friends, God's grace is not cheap. God's grace is costly. Costly grace. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, a gift which must be asked for, a door at which we must knock. Such grace is costly because it cost a disciple to follow. It is grace because it cost a disciple to follow Jesus Christ. Such grace is costly because it cost a disciple his or her life. It is grace because it gives a disciple the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and it is grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, my Christian friends, such grace is costly because it cost Jesus Christ his life. And above all, it is grace because Christ did not reckon his life too dear a price to reconcile you and me to God and to each other. Costly grace is a life of discipleship in Jesus Christ.